On a warm golden afternoon at the city's bustling amusement park, where children ran between bright rides and the air hummed with music and laughter, a single moment shattered the carefree mood. It happened so quickly that most people never noticed it. Just a small hand lifted quietly, palm out, trembling ever so slightly. But for those who paid attention, that gesture meant everything. It was the universal signal for help. A silent SOS from a child who didn't dare speak. And that little boy with fear swimming behind his brown eyes had no idea if anyone would even see him. But someone did, someone unexpected, someone the public often crossed the street to avoid. If you believe kindness still exists in this world, especially in the most unexpected people, then please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Your support helps us spread stories of courage, humanity, and second chances. The boy's name was Mason Hartley, a gentle 6-year-old with soft features and a heart too fragile for the storm he'd been living in. His mother had passed away the previous winter, leaving him in the custody of her younger brother, a man named Craig Rolson, who had promised the courts he'd provide care. But once the door closed and the world stopped watching, Craig turned into a cruel shadow of responsibility. Anger fueled him, drinking guided him, and Mason became the quiet target of his frustrations. Mason rarely cried, not because he wasn't hurting, but because he'd learned that crying only made things worse. That particular Saturday, Craig dragged him to the amusement park, not out of love or an attempt at bonding, but because he had a meeting scheduled behind the roller coaster stalls with men Mason didn't know, men whose presence made the boy's stomach twist with dread. While the crowds filled the sunlit pathways, Mason felt more alone than he ever had. Craig held his hand too tightly, his grip like a warning, and every step toward the back of the park filled Mason with growing fear. But then something caught Craig's attention, and he stopped to answer a phone call. That tiny moment of distraction opened a window of hope. Mason remembered something his school counselor had once taught the kids during a safety drill. If you're in danger and can't speak, raise your hand. Open palm. Someone will notice. He didn't fully believe it, but he tried anyway. Slowly, subtly, he lifted his small hand, palm toward the crowd, heart pounding so hard he felt it in his throat. He didn't look directly at anyone. He didn't dare, but he prayed anyone would understand. That was when Axel Maddox saw him. Axel wasn't the kind of man most parents wanted near their children. Tall, broad, and inked from shoulder to wrist with a steel gray beard and a terrifying stillness about him. He wore the unmistakable black-cut vest of a Hell's Angel rider. He was a man people whispered about, judged instantly and avoided instinctively. But people rarely knew his full story. How he'd lost a child years ago, how that loss had carved a permanent ache into him, how he turned his grief into fierce protectiveness for anyone smaller and weaker than the threats around them. He had learned to read fear, and Mason's hand signal felt like a punch to the chest. In an instant, Axel's world narrowed. There was no music, no laughter, no swirl of motion from the spinning rides behind him, only that little boy's silent plea. He watched Mason's eyes flick toward the tattooed arm holding him too tightly. And that was all Axel needed to know. He moved with quiet purpose, not wanting to spook the boy or alert the men beside him. His boots stuttered softly on the sun-war-armed pavement as he approached the warm California light glinting off his chain wallet and belt buckle. Craig noticed him too late. By the time he turned, Axel was already close, too close to ignore. Craig tried to posture, puffing his chest slightly, but Axel wasn't there to intimidate. He simply lowered his voice and asked one calm, deadly serious question that only Craig heard. Whatever Axel said made the color drain from Craig's face. Maybe it was the certainty in Axel's tone. Or maybe the knowledge that people like Axel didn't bluff. Not when it came to children. Craig's grip loosened. Mason felt air rush back into his lungs. The moment Craig stepped back, Axel knelt down, bringing himself to the little boy's height. In the soft glowing daylight, his hardened expression melted as he scanned Mason's face, checking for bruises, fear, signs of distress. Mason didn't speak, but he didn't have to. Axel gently placed his hand over the boy's raised one, lowering it slowly. For the first time in months, Mason felt safe. Axel reached out a hand, not to Craig, but to security personnel he had already signaled moments earlier with a subtle nod. Within minutes, 2 staff members and a park officer arrived. They separated Craig, asked questions, and listened closely to Mason's halting, shaky words. Craig tried to deny everything, but his anger betrayed him, and he was soon escorted away with authorities waiting near the exit. As the chaos unfolded, Axel stayed with Mason. He guided him to a bench shaded by colorful ride banners, buying him a bottle of cold water, and sitting beside him without speaking, just offering quiet presence. Mason leaned into him, not because Axel asked, but because he felt the first safe shoulder he had known in so long. Axel didn't flinch, he didn't move, he let the boy rest. When Mason's aunt, Elena Briggs, was contacted and arrived breathless at the park gates, her eyes flooded with tears, seeing her nephew safe and wrapped gently in Axel's protective stance. She had been fighting for custody for months, desperate to get Mason away from Craig, but stuck in legal knots. Now seeing him cling to Axel, she knew this moment, this miracle, had given her a chance to save him. Axel stepped back respectfully, letting the family reunite. But as he turned to walk away, Mason ran forward and hugged him tightly around the waist. For a man who had once lost a child, that simple hug hit deeper than anything in years. Axel rested a gentle hand on Mason's back for just a moment before sending him off with a soft nod. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it across your social platforms and subscribe to Kindness Corner. These real and heartfelt stories remind us that compassion can appear from anyone, even from the people society misjudges the most. Before we end, tell us in the comments, do you believe heroes can come from the most unexpected places? In the warm glow of that afternoon, as families continued laughing and the rides spun happily in the background, one truth remained clear. Sometimes the strongest angels come wearing leather, tattoos, and a rough exterior. And sometimes all it takes is one raised hand for a miracle to happen.